Rumpelstiltzkin by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. There was once upon a time a poor miller who had a beautiful daughter. It happened one day that he had an audience with the king, and in order to appear important, he told the king that he had a daughter who could spin straw into gold. "Now that's a talent worth having," the king said to the miller. "If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her to my palace tomorrow, and I'll test her." When the girl was brought to him, he led her into a room full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and a spindle, and said, "Now set to work and spin all night, and if by early dawn you haven't spun the straw into gold, you shall die." Then he closed the door behind him and left her alone inside. So the poor miller's daughter sat down. She hadn't the least idea of how to spin straw into gold, and at last she began to cry. Suddenly, the door opened, and in stepped a tiny little man, who said, "Good evening, Miss Miller Maid. Why are you crying so bitterly?" "Oh," answered the girl, "I have to spin straw into gold, and I haven't the slightest notion of how it's done." What will you give me if I spin it for you?" asked the mannikin. "My necklace," replied the girl. The little man took the necklace, sat down at the wheel, and whir, round it went until all morning, when all the straw was spun away and all the bobbins were full of gold. As soon as the sun rose, the king came, and when he saw the gold he was astonished and delighted, but he wanted more of the precious metal. He had the miller's daughter put into another room, much bigger than the first, and full of straw, and bade her that if she valued her life, spin it all into gold before morning. When the girl began to cry, the tiny little man appeared and said, "What will you give me if I spin the straw into gold for you?" "The ring for my finger," answered the girl. The mannikin took the ring, and when morning broke he had spun all the straw into glittering gold. The king was pleased beyond measure at the sight, but he was still not satisfied, and he had the miller's daughter brought into yet a bigger room full of straw, and said, "You must spin all this away in the night, but if you succeed this time, you shall become my wife." This time, when the girl was alone, the little man appeared for the third time and said, What'll you give me if I spin the straw for you this third time?" "I've nothing more to give," answered the girl. "Then promise me, when you are queen, to give me your first child." Seeing no other way out of it, she promised the mannikin and set to her work. When the king came in the morning, he found the gold. He straightway made her his wife. When a beautiful son was born to her, she did not think of the little man, till all of a sudden one day he stepped into her room and said, "Now give me what you promised." The queen offered the little man all the riches in her kingdom if he would only leave her the child. But the mannikin said, "No, a living creature is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world." Then the queen began to cry and sob so bitterly that the little man was sorry for her, and said, "I'll give you 3 days, and if in that time you guess my name, you may keep your child." The queen pondered the whole night over the names she had heard, and sent messengers to scour the land, and to pick up far and near any names they should come across. When the little man arrived, she began with Casper, Melchior, Belshazzar, Sheepshanks, Cruikshanks, Spindleshanks, and so on through the long list. At every name the little man shook his head. At last a messenger reported, "As I came upon a high hill round the corner of the wood, where the foxes and hares bid each other good night, I saw a little house, and in front of the little house burned a fire, and a man round the fire sprang the most grotesque little man, hopping on one leg and crying, 'Tomorrow I brew, today I bake, and then the child away I'll take, for little deems my royal dame that Rumpelstiltzkin is my name.' When the little man stepped in afterward and asked his name, she said, 'Is your name Conrad?' 'No.' 'Is your name perhaps Rumpelstiltzkin?' "Some demon has told you that! Some demon has told you that!" screamed the little man, as he vanished into the air. The end.